guys, Franchise here with Franchise80s.com. Thank you once again for joining me on another one of my podcasts. Today, I will have the pleasure of speaking to Bompa from Bompa's Collectibles. Let's give him a call right now and see what he has to say.
Yeah.
Bompa.
Franchise.
So, when I introduced you as Bompa from Bompa's Collectibles, right?
All right.
All right. So you explain your collectibles store. It's a spot in Gums, right?
My collectibles is just what I call my treasures, and it's just I want to have an object that I'm comfortable believing that I'm the only kid on the block with one of these.
Yep.
Which is why a lot of times if I'm able and I find a little treasure like this, I get two. That way I get to keep one and I can pass another one along.
Yeah.
And
you have a spot there at Gums, right?
Yes, I do. It's
where's Gums?
Upstairs. Gums is a two-story antique and collectible malls. I think it's got over it's either 11 or 18,000 square feet. There's 2 floors. Luckily, I'm right upstairs, right at the head of the stairs.
Yeah.
And I think there's 3 sets of stairs going up. So in one of the corners, the stairs in the corner, you go up, and the first thing you see is my area, and it's the last one you see when you go back down. So
that place is big. I have a spot at Ola's, but
right.
Gums is nice. It's bigger. I think more people go there. And what city is it in? I forgot.
It's at Hawaiian Gardens.
Hawaiian Gardens, that's right. So
right.
Ola's.
As a matter of fact, it's almost just right around the corner.
Yeah, it is. It's right around the corner. Right. I was going to ask you. The 3 questions I always ask, right?
Okay.
And so the first one I want to ask you. We'll save the hardest one for last, okay?
Okay.
So, what are your top 3 favorite movies of all time?
Of all time.
I bet I could guess one of them.
I bet you probably could too.
But go ahead. I'll let you answer.
But then again, that's another thing that through the years we changed. Now there was a time when you would have asked me what my top 3 movies of all time was, and I was sure to give you 3 John Wayne movies.
Yeah, I'm sure it changes. Okay, as of right now, is where you stand.
As of right now, off the top of my head, the first one that comes to mind would have to be, I think, Tombstone. If I was locked away and had only one DVD and played and entertain myself that I'd have to watch over and over again, I don't think I could ever get tired of Tombstone.
That's the one I would have guessed too.
My second one would have to be Star Wars. The first Star Wars. I don't mean Star Wars #1. I mean episode #4.
Yeah, 1977.
77.
Sure, like the holy grail of probably all the movies. Yes.
And you know that I have waited for every Star Wars that has come out since then to surpass the first one, in the sense that the first one was so far ahead of its time, the technology that was being invented for that, and the things that we were seeing on the screen, and that was mind-blowing. It came out, nobody expected it from the beginning, when you've got the story going off into space as you're reading it.
And you're
that
still
had never been done before, and that was just unique.
And you're still waiting, because I don't think it ever been
40 years later, you're thinking with the green screen. I mean, 40 years later, come on, blow me out of my seat again.
It's so hard. It's so hard to do that, because with the first one, you're seeing something that has never been done before. It's
right.
Something's being.
I want to see something I've never seen before.
But it's bringing something to life, and once it's already been brought to life, how can you? That's a hard act to follow,
Right.
So my third question.
Oh wait, we didn't get to my third movie yet.
Oh wait, we didn't. Wait a minute. Okay, hold on. We got Tombstone, Star Wars. What's your third movie? After Star Wars, you should save that one for last. Okay, what's your third movie?
No, because I've got one that I could immerse myself in. Again, like you could with Tombstone, and that would have to be Dawn of the Dead.
Wow, really? Dawn of the Dead.
It all began with Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
By George A. Romero, who did this on a meager budget, and it has since become a cult classic. But the Night of the Living Dead spawned Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
And then that spawned Day of the Dead. And then, let's see, Dawn of the Day of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead Part 2. And, you know, this is where the zombies came from, if I'm not mistaken. George A. Romero with Night of the Living Dead is the one who invented the entire zombie genre.
That's certainly a cult classic. You got three epic movies.
Dawn of the Dead. Now they remade Dawn of the Dead with Ving Rhames and a couple other more known actors. But the original Dawn of the Dead, where it takes place in the shopping mall.
Yeah.
You know, very few movies that they give me bad dreams, but you know, that one was up there. So yeah, those would be my three favorite. I think
those are
Star Wars and Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, those are epic movies. So those are good choices. All right. So my third question: if you had a time machine,
okay,
would you travel to the past or to the future, and why?
Oh, I have to admit, I've thought of that, and I struggle with that because in reality, I would like to do both. I'd like to go to the past and
sure.
You
only could go one place, though.
You know that if you go to the past, you know, you can pretty much have an idea of what's taking place.
Mm-hmm.
You go into the future, and you're going to be lonely there, and you probably won't understand things as well as, you know. But past or future, to me, that's like saying, would you like to be the richest person on the poor side of town, or the poorest person on the rich side of town?
Wow, that's a good way of looking at it. So what would you pick?
I think I would pick the past, simply because, like I said, I would feel uneasy going into the future and being surrounded by, especially the way technology is snowballing now. I would be absolutely lost. But if I go into the past, you know what? Give me a blacksmith shop and a couple of guys to do the work, and I can invent some stuff that they've never seen before that we take for granted, and I can make myself the town hero. Sure.
You know that most people I ask, almost 99.9% of people I ask this question to, always say the past. And I think I know one of the reasons why, and I say the past too. I think one of the reasons why people would rather go to the past is that because as a human being, you're always looking for an advantage, and the past will give you an advantage. You'd have almost like a superpower, and the superpower is knowledge. You have evolved further than most people at that time. So if you're from this time and you go back to the 30s and 40s, you know, you're essentially going to be the smartest guy in the room anytime you walk in anywhere, right?
If you could actually travel in the past, would you look yourself up?
Yeah, of course, probably. I don't know if I'd want to talk to myself, but
I'll bet you that hasn't happened yet, right?
No. Has not happened. No. No. But I wouldn't know. See, I wouldn't make. Now you said look myself up. I wouldn't make contact with myself. I would not make contact with myself. So I wouldn't. Maybe it has happened, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
No, if that could happen, I could have saved myself a few stitches along the way. You know.
So, okay. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. First off, just to get an idea, you don't have to say how old you are, but you can give me your age group.
I don't know.
Okay, how old are you?
Well, you come the middle of June. I'm about to start my seventh decade. I'm going to be 70.
Wow. So that's awesome. So you have experienced a lot of stuff.
I'm really only 35, but my body, tells everybody. My birth certificate says I'm 70, but I'm not handling the idea of getting old at all.
But you're not really 70, because I know you, and you're 70, but you look like you're in your mid 40s, and you act like you're in your mid 20s.
Well, my only response to that is something my daughter said just off the cuff that to me made a whole lot of sense. She said, "You don't look around. Not everybody ages the same. Some people don't age well."
Yeah, I don't age well. I don't think I age well. You age well. Well, that's good.
Well, only because we're on the subject, and not to tout it, but less than a week ago, I was talking to somebody and mentioned that my birthday was coming up in June. Asked how old I was going to be, and because this is going to be a milestone, I stepped back and we'll take a look. How old would you say I'm going to be? And the answer came back somewhere between 56 and 58.
That's excellent. That's what I told you. And I said mid-40s.
I would like to say I see myself, like that, but I don't know. I just see myself as me. But if I'm standing around people my own age, I feel like I'm standing around with other people's grandparents.
Yep. And like I said mid-40s, but I'm an exaggerator, so it's more like mid-50s, maybe early 60s.
Okay.
Right? But I wanted to ask you.
I'd like to tell you that it's due to, clean living, exercise, watching what you eat.
Yeah.
But no, I'm a junk food junkie. And,
Yeah, I was going to say, you can't tell me that because I know better.
I tried lifting weights once and found out, no, they were just too heavy.
Yeah. So I want to ask you what you remember about life back here I'm assuming you were around here in the Southern California area, Lakewood, Bellflower, Cerritos,
Actually,
in the 80s.
I was born in Long Beach. I was only born 7 miles from here. I graduated from high school 4 blocks from here.
What high school?
Mayfair High School.
Mayfair High School. Okay.
Mayfair High School.
And you have how many generations of your family
have gone to Mayfair?
Have gone to Mayfair.
Everybody since me, pretty much. Okay, I graduated from Mayfair. Met my wife after high school. Well, she was from New York, so that would count anyway. But I graduated from there. My son graduated from there. My daughter graduated from there.
Yeah.
And 2 of my 3 grandchildren have graduated from there. My youngest is due to graduate this June with high honors, no less.
Yep.
And it looks like there's not going to be a graduation.
Isn't that crazy?
No senior prom, no graduation.
So out of all those years and all those decades and every year,
right.
All of those years from the time that you've gone there all the way up to now,
right.
There has always, right, no matter what has gone on in the world, wars and 9/11, terrorist attacks and whatever else there's been some significant events. But out of all of those years and all those events, there has always been a graduation ceremony for a graduating class. Am I correct? Or has
absolutely? No, absolutely. I've never heard of a graduation being canceled for any reason.
So this is the first time in the history,
right?
I think, human history, since schooling's been going on, I'm assuming that there has actually the seniors will not get a graduation. That's sad. But it's very historic, too. I mean, you'll be able one day to say, "Hey, I was part of that senior class that, we never got a ceremony for because of the pandemic."
He's walking around with a letterman's jacket.
Yeah.
This is his senior year. I mean, seriously, once you graduate, how often do you wear a letterman's jacket?
Yeah. It's a beautiful letterman's jacket.
Going to wear it too.
It's really sad everything that's going on, but.
Well, with his situation, as far as I'm concerned, it's mixed emotions. I'm really, really disappointed that, like I say, he's going to miss out on the prom, on senior night at Disneyland,
yeah,
graduation ceremony. But on the other hand, I'm really excited knowing that he's already officially enrolled at Cal State Long Beach.
That's.
It's funny because those people too, they really come to the realization I spent how much money to put my son through high school when I just now paid our plumber.
Yeah.
So.
It's really crazy, but anyway, this world's crazy.
Well, the best thing about a trade school is it's one particular subject that you go after. You don't have to have all these other subjects and whatever in your repertoire to get your degree.
Yeah.
You're going after what you wanted. I mean, even when I was in high school, I had a big part of my grade had to do with the test that we had to take on the history of Japan. I'm not around, have met or known many Asian people in my life, but I have to know everything there is to know about the creation and history of Japan. And I do that in order to graduate.
Yeah.
Well, that's over 50 years ago. Do you know that not one time in over 50 years has anybody asked me what I know about the history of Japan?
Well, I think hopefully.
I had an opportunity to bring it up in a conversation either.
Yeah. But I think maybe in 100 years or 50 or 100 years, maybe the education system will change and they'll find a more efficient way, because I think there's a better way. I think than what we currently have. But I was going to ask you about the decade that the 80s where you were around. I wanted to ask you about some of the differences and some of the experiences that you had growing up around that time.
Well, a lot of things happened in the 80s that were just, in my mind, they really changed things. Because if I'm not mistaken, it was in the 80s. Well, in the very early 80s, take a look at your Guinness Book of World Records.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that the world's largest shopping mall was right here in Lakewood, California?
It was?
It covered more acreage than any other mall in the world.
Wait, the Lakewood Mall?
Lakewood Center Mall.
It was the largest?
In 1980, Guinness Book of World Records under the largest malls in America, and it'll list Lakewood. Now, Lakewood is dwarfed by malls now.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that. I knew Del Amo Mall up to maybe, I think, up until the maybe 4 or 5 years ago was the largest mall in the world, the Del Amo Mall.
No. I'm not mistaken.
It's not no more, but it was. It was for a while. Now I'm sure Lakewood was bigger than that because the Del Amo Mall wasn't around when you're back in the 80s.
Well, if you take a look at Lakewood, there's a lot of Lakewood Mall now that isn't. There's no stores on that property. They were talking about acreage. The amount of land that it covers. Lakewood Center Mall was the biggest mall.
That's awesome. Lakewood's had a lot of history,
But if you had just simple home repair jobs, up until the 80s, you would go to the lumber store, to get your lumber. You would go to
Home Depot. I remember Handyman. Do you remember Handyman?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember Handyman? The store Handyman? There was a Handyman across the street from my house.
Exactly. That was a hardware store.
It was a hardware store.
You had a hardware store and a lumber store, and that's where you got your stuff.
Yeah,
your paint didn't come from the paint store, it came from the hardware store.
Yeah. So you do remember Handyman?
Oh, yeah. I remember white front department stores. Now, they went, if I'm not mistaken, they went out in the 80s, I think. But before that, that was your big mall.
And there was no Walmarts, right? There was no Walmarts?
No.
Not really any Targets? No, right? But they had Woolworth was like the Walmart, right? Woolworth?
Yeah, pretty much. And you also had J.J. Newberry's, and you had W.T. Grant's.
Where were those? Were those here locally?
No, those were, if I'm not mistaken, Newberry's was pretty much nationwide.
Okay, I didn't know that.
We lost a lot of businesses. Okay, there was Newberry's, there was W.T. Grant's, there was Zodi's, there was Whitefront. Those who just there was Jimco, GBMCO. That was more like a Costco type thing. It was a membership store.
Which one was like a
Jimco?
Jimco, yeah, I remember Jimco. And then Fedco too, right? Fedco was like you would say like a Costco, right, or a Sam's Club.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then remember we were talking about off of 183rd there was Pick and Save and Best.
Right.
And Best was like you said a catalog store, right?
Yes, it was. Yes. Yeah, it was a store where you could actually go in and shop, but they also had a catalog area that you would go, instead of going through the store, you would go through the catalog, pick your item, pay the lady for it, and you would wait in the lobby area there, and then a few minutes later it would come down on a conveyor belt, and you would take your item and take off with it.
You know what I noticed? That most of my viewers probably don't even know what we'd be talking about here because a lot of the people who watch my podcast are young and they probably wouldn't even realize that how many phones there was around in the area now that you can't find any pay phones. There's something you don't see anymore.
How to use a payphone nowadays? I don't think it's been that long.
Yeah, there isn't any. I mean, there used to be all over the place payphones, and then also phone. You'd get your phone catalog every.
The phone book.
The phone book, right? You get your phone book.
They also did away with the freeway call boxes in most areas.
Yeah.
Because everybody has a cell phone now.
What do you do if you don't have a cell phone? I can't think of, I wonder.
Somebody down, tell them to call.
Oh my God. Yeah, they must have some sort of emergency call box somewhere still on the freeways, but
I think it depends on just what freeways. I mean, if you got some long stretches where you break down and there's a possibility you can't get service, yeah, you might find some out that way. But for the most part, around town, at least from what I've seen in the last 10 years, they've done away with a lot of freeway call boxes. If I'm not mistaken, all along the Long Beach Freeway, those are gone now.
that's just so crazy. It's so much. It's just so amazing how much everything has changed. Every 10 years seems to be bigger changes and bigger changes. Did you ever think you'd ever have the capability of doing all the things that you could possibly think of doing on your phone? I mean, it's more than just a telephone. It's a computer.
I came to the conclusion that it's not a phone. It's a computer. It's a computer that just happens to have the phone attachment to it.
Yeah.
You know, and this is space-age stuff. I mean, if you take a look at, I'd already graduated high school when Star Trek came out, and they come out with the flip phone communicator.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already surpassed that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody could have imagined a device in your hand that would replace so many devices. I mean, it replaces a telephone, it replaces a computer, it replaces a calculator, which a computer has replaced anyways, but it replaces a voice recorder, it replaces a camera, it replaces a video camera, it replaces so many things. It replaces, in some cases, it even replaces games and arcades and gaming systems.
The date, the weather, it's got information, anything, any question you want, you can have an answer right there at your fingertips.
It's like a personal concierge as well. You know, you just ask it for something and boom, right at your fingertips. It replaces road maps. You remember when you didn't have a cell phone, you had to know how to get to a certain point. You'd have to unfold that thing.
Are you familiar with the Thomas bag or Thomas Brothers map books?
Yeah, I used to when I was little.
I don't think they even sell those anymore. But,
I don't either. Well, they do at antique stores like Gums and Ola's, right?
Kind of hard to find a current edition, though. You know.
Yeah, you're not gonna find a current edition. So
I got GPS to take you.
So speaking about all these changes, I want to ask you, okay, because we're in the midst of, I think, this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. I wanted to ask you, so you've lived through some pretty big events, right? You lived through. You probably remember where you were when JFK was assassinated.
Not only that, but I shook hands with Robert F. Kennedy 2 nights before he died.
Wow, that's crazy.
I was up in Oregon, and he made a speech up there. And as he was leaving, I stuck my hand out and I shook hands with him. That's my claim to fame.
So that must have been a big impact when JFK died.
Well, no, I mean JFK. Yeah, I was in junior high school when that happened. And,
well, what was a bigger impact in your life, when JFK died, or where were you when Abraham Lincoln got assassinated? I'm kidding.
About that one.
Okay, so wait, so you've had I'm just guessing that the 3 biggest events in your life have been the assassination of John F. Kennedy, 9/11, and now this pandemic. Would that be a fair statement?
That would be a fair statement, because I'm trying to think in my mind what I would have to top that. And no, those are,
So out of those 3 events, what is the biggest? Would it be this one? I mean, this one's caused the most.
Well, I was when Kennedy was assassinated. I was in a metal shop, junior high school, and then all of a sudden, over the loudspeaker, we hear, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States is dead." Now, when he said the President of the United States, everybody goes, "Okay, the President's going to make a speech or whatever. What's this about?" But when they said he's dead, everything just went stone quiet. Everybody's just looking around, because
what were your first thoughts? Did you think of assassination? Your first thoughts? Did you think he died somehow, an accident or illness, or did you think assassination?
And then everybody's wondering what. Well, then a few minutes later they came out with that he had been shot. you know. And it was tough because he was a very charismatic person, and believe it or not, even kids, you know, our age, we just kind of, you know, took to him. We knew nothing about politics. The girls, oh my God, maybe it was his accent, the way he wore his hair.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I thought, you know, dude's got the hottest wife in town.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, who could forget
But yeah, when he was assassinated, that was you know, that was only a couple of years after he was elected. Didn't see that one coming.
Now, out of the three, which one has affected your life the most?
That would be 9/11. I got emotional on 9/11.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can understand that. I think everybody was extremely emotional. I was scared. I remember 9/11. I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought the world was coming to an end.
Right.
But that brought the most changes, I think. Life changed after that in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways it changed. There's so many things we have to do now that we didn't have to do before 9/11. But I think this is going to be the biggest impact.
I'm just going to say, buckle up, Buttercup. You haven't seen anything like one's going to take place now.
I don't know if life is we know it will go back to I mean,
how are we going to put 50 million people back to work in 2 weeks?
Yeah, not only that. Yeah, the impact to the economy, but we've seen it. Well, I haven't lived through it, but the Great Depression. We might see another depression, sort of like that. But my thing is, how do you go back to having a stadium filled with 100,000 people? After this, or movie theaters, or feeling comfortable in jam-packed buses. I mean, to know that this has already happened, it could happen again.
No, they'll do the same thing to people that they did with polio. See, I was one of the first recipients of the polio vaccine too.
Oh, okay.
And when they come up with a vaccine for this, like, okay, now you can get it. Yeah, then you can go sit next to whoever you want, but then.
But now that we know that this is possible,
because this isn't the only bug that.
That's what I'm saying, Bompa. Now that we know this is possible, we know this could happen. It's just amazing to me that something so tiny and microscopic could do so much damage could almost be at the top of the food chain over humans. It potentially, if one of these things comes around that's worse than what we could ever imagine, it could wipe out the human race. To think that we could be wiped out with such a such a device, or such a bacteria or virus, it's so small.
Well, I think this would be a good time to also consider prepping for an EMP. They can they can throw $1 billion into the research and get that to where, okay, no big deal.
Yeah.
Because it's not only Korea and Russia that we would have to worry about, but our own sun can throw out a pulse like that to shut off all of our electricity.
Jeez, could you imagine that? I mean,
I tried to, and it's an ugly scenario.
Heck yeah! I mean, the only thing keeping people going is Netflix right now, or Hulu. Excuse me.
But if there was one, I can't call it a positive thing, but one thing did come out of the situation that we're in now is now, for the first time in over 50 years, I can tell people that because of my science teacher in high school, I can tell you that a virus is an ultramicroscopic agent of infection which is small enough to pass through a porcelain filter.
Wow. That's awesome.
See, I don't know what that means, but I had to learn that to pass my science test.
But you know what? Your science teacher would be so proud that you remembered that. I couldn't even remember that, but that's pretty awesome.
My science teacher probably passed away about 20 years ago.
Yeah. I can imagine, unless she was really good at science and figured out a way to cheat death. So let me ask you real quick too. What I'm going to ask you, would you consider to be the greatest decade in the history of your life?
Oh. That would have to be between 1980 and 1990.
So the 80s.
Yes. between being 30 and 40. So, oh yes.
Okay, so the 80s. So the 80s, you feel that the 80s is the greatest decade of your lifetime?
For me personally, yes. The 80s were absolutely the greatest.
That's awesome,
decade.
because most people my age would say that, I think, because we were at the right age. I think, but a lot of people your age would probably say the 60s. So I'm surprised to hear that.
Well, I'm looking at it this way. Yeah, the 60s. Oh God, the 60s were fun for me. I was a teenager during the British invasion. But by the time I hit 30, I was already settled. Had wife, kids, whatever. Was in my chosen profession, and was successful at that, and just enjoying myself. Got to do things that hadn't been done before.
God, can you imagine your first computer?
My first computer. My son had gotten a job at Epson Computers, and so through him, I got a brand new, still in the original box, a brand new Epson Equity 2 Plus with a, ready for this, a 40 megabyte hard drive. 40. They told me I could operate a small business with that thing because that was one of the top of the line personal computers you could get for the time.
Dude, 40 megabytes for your first computer? That's
40 megabyte hard drive.
You were big time. 40 megabytes was pretty big back then. Yeah, my first
program that gave me an outline of the space shuttle, and I was,
my first computer I think had 20 megabytes. So yeah, you were big time. That's awesome. That's awesome to hear that. Well, I think we're gonna cut it short. Thank you for all your wisdom that you've I'm sure that some people will find this interesting, and the people who don't, well, there's a bunch of other stuff to watch on YouTube, right?
Yeah, make another episode of Franchise80s.
Sure, right. So
feel free to call me back again. And speaking of the 80s, I'll tell you about when I got addicted to my Atari machine.
Oh yes. Well, maybe you could. What was your favorite game?
It was Firefox.
Oh.
I don't even know if you could find that game now, but
yeah,
that almost caused me trouble in my marriage. It was just one of those games that no matter what, you determined to beat this game, and I was neglecting anything and everybody around me. I just to where I was addicted to that game. Just trying to get caught.
Okay, one last question. One last question. I'm going to give you two questions. Two questions, okay? Because the majority of people who watch this channel are big. They're big into toys. They're big into games, arcade games. They're my age, usually around my age, and they're big time wrestling fans. And I know you're probably not a big wrestling fan, but I'm going to ask you, what was the arcade game that you played the most that you can remember in the arcades?
You know what? I was a videoholic when that came out. I mean, surrounded by kids and teenagers. I'm a middle-aged man, and they're just.
Did you ever dump a bunch of coins into a certain game where you can remember saying,
yeah,
"Man, I spent a lot of money on that game"? Galaga?
Yeah, I dropped a lot of quarters in that machine.
Oh my God, I love it.
And pole position. Pole position was another one that I really enjoyed.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, one last question. Okay, see if you can remember the first time or the first wrestler that you ever knew or have heard of.
Oh my gosh, that would have to be Freddie Blassie.
Wow, way back then. Okay.
yeah, I told you about him. Well,
Classy Freddie Blassie. Boy, he was. I heard he was such a villain that he got acid thrown on him.
There was him and Mr. Moto. That was another one. There was
people hated those guys.
Oh yes, I know, which made me just really root for the bad guy.
That's awesome because you know more about wrestling than most people. Because most people they go to the default answer, which is Hulk Hogan, because he's the most famous wrestler.
Right. I go back to the old black and white days of wrestling.
Yeah, wrestling was actually one of the first things on TV. It was a staple of the television. It helped. Introduce television into people's homes. They was pretty much all there was to watch back in that day.
Right.
And it was pretty big. It was what the world was watching at the time.
So, yes, it was, and nobody looked at it like it was fake.
No, people didn't know. I mean, the wrestlers really. It was called kayfabe. The wrestlers kayfabed a lot of it, which is a secret word for keeping the business secret. There's the kayfabe's out the window now because most people know that it's sports entertainment and then everything's scripted. But back then, if you said anything to a wrestler about it being fake, you wouldn't even get the word fake out of your mouth before that wrestler was slapping you in the face.
Did that feel fake?
Yeah, remember there was Dr. D. David Schultz slapped the shit out of a reporter for that. They took it very seriously, and it was very serious stuff back in the day. It was a secret society, and it was a brotherhood, and they protected their business as much. It was like the mafia,
Well,
it was their
all
thing.
Really good actors too,
Yeah, yep. They really sold it. So. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me on another episode of the Franchise80s Podcast. I won't have you again. And please check out Bompa's Collectibles if you're ever around the Hawaiian Gardens area to Gums. Thank you, Bompa.